55 years of life, 30 years of hard work, and 15 years of marriage, all packed into two cardboard boxes sitting on a mahogany desk. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corner office, Chicago was disappearing behind a curtain of aggressive, swirling snow. It was early December, and the city was bracing for a blizzard, but the chill inside the headquarters of Miller and Company Solutions felt far more biting than anything nature could conjure. Tom Miller stared at the humble contents of his life. There wasn't much to show for decades of building a tech empire from a garage. A chipped ceramic mug that read "World's Okayest Dad," a joke gift from a niece years ago, sat next to a framed photograph. The photo was faded, showing a younger, scruffier Tom standing next to his late father in front of their very first storefront. They looked tired but invincible. Tom picked up the photo, his thumb brushing over his father's smiling face. He wore a worn wool sweater that had seen better days, the kind that was comfortable and practical, much like the man himself. He didn't fit the gleaming glass and steel aesthetic of the modern office anymore. Perhaps he never really had. The door clicked open. The sound of sharp, expensive heels cut through the silence like a metronome counting down to an execution. Tom didn't need to turn around to know it was Elena. "I hope you're almost done," Elena said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was clinical, devoid of any warmth, as if she were addressing a vendor who had missed a delivery deadline. Tom turned slowly. Elena stood there in a sharp charcoal designer suit that probably cost more than his first car. She looked radiant, powerful, and utterly cold. She placed a thick manila folder on the desk, right next to his cardboard boxes. "What is this, Elena?" Tom asked, his voice low and steady. "More paperwork for the merger?" "Better," she replied, her eyes flicking to her watch. "It's the divorce decree. My attorney says if you sign now, we can have this finalized before the new year. Irreconcilable differences." Tom looked at the folder, then back at her. 15 years, Elena. And you hand me this on a Tuesday afternoon like a quarterly report. Don't be dramatic, Tom. We both know this marriage has been dead for years. I'm just the only one brave enough to bury it. She tapped a second document lying beneath the divorce papers. "And this is your termination notice." Tom blinked, the only sign of shock he allowed himself to show. "Termination? I co-founded this company." "You were a co-founder," Elena corrected, smoothing her blazer. "Now you're a liability. Look at you, Tom. You wear sweaters from the 90s. You drink diner coffee. You refuse to embrace the new aggressive marketing strategies Gavin and I have developed. We need a younger, sharper image. You're holding us back." "The board agrees. Well, the board I control agrees." Tom reached out and opened the termination notice. His eyes scanned the legal jargon until they landed on a specific paragraph. "A non-compete clause?" he asked quietly. "I can't work in the industry for 5 years? I can't have you going to a competitor with our trade secrets," Elena said with a shrug. "Consider it a forced retirement. You get a severance package. It's generous. Take the money, go play golf, or move to Florida. Just go." "Is this what you really want?" Tom asked, searching her face for any trace of the woman he had married. "To erase me completely?" Elena sighed, a sound of pure impatience. "I'm not erasing you, Tom. I'm just pruning the dead branches so the tree can grow." The room fell silent, save for the wind howling against the glass. Pruning the dead branches. That was how she saw him. Useless wood. Dead weight. Tom didn't scream. He didn't throw the stapler or beg. He simply nodded, a slow, rhythmic motion. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his security badge and his keycard, and placed them gently on the mahogany desk. They made a soft clack against the wood. "You're right, Elena," Tom said, picking up his boxes. "Growth is important." He walked past her, smelling her expensive perfume, a scent that used to mean home but now smelled like betrayal. He didn't look back as he stepped into the hallway. As Tom walks to the elevator, he whispers to himself, "Pruning the dead branches, be careful you don't cut the roots." Wow, that was a chilling warning from Tom, wasn't it? If you are still watching and find value in this detailed storytelling, please comment the number 8 below to let me know you're here with us. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend you subscribe to Black King and hit that notification bell right now. You definitely don't want to miss the moment Elena realizes her mistake. Your support helps us continue creating amazing content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's continue. The neon sign of Betty's Diner buzzed with a warmth that the glass and steel office of Miller and Company could never replicate. It was a sound Tom Miller had known for 20 years, a comforting hum that accompanied the smell of frying bacon, old vinyl booths, and coffee that actually tasted like coffee, not burnt hazelnut syrup. While Tom sought refuge in the familiar, back at the headquarters of Miller and Company, the atmosphere was electric with a very different kind of energy. In the boardroom, Elena stood looking out at the city, a glass of sparkling water in hand. Beside her sat Gavin, the company's new 30-year-old chief financial officer. Gavin was everything Tom was not: charismatic, impeccably groomed, and loud. He leaned back in Tom's old leather chair, his Italian loafers resting on the edge of the conference table. "The Christmas gala needs to be spectacular, Elena," Gavin insisted, scrolling through budget sheets on his tablet. "It's our coming-out party. The market needs to see that Miller and Company isn't some dusty old legacy firm anymore. We need ice sculptures, live jazz, the works." "It sounds expensive, Gavin," Elena said, though she smiled. She liked his ambition. It made her feel young again. "We're already stretching the Q4 budget with the rebranding." "That's why we trim the fat," Gavin said dismissively. He tapped a list of names on the screen. "Look at the payroll. We have too many legacy employees. People who've been here since the 90s. Their salaries are bloated, and their tech skills are dinosaurs. If we cut 5 or 6 of them now, we cover the gala and our end-of-year bonuses." Elena hesitated for a fraction of a second, staring at the names. Some of them had attended her wedding. "Make it happen," she said finally. "If they can't keep up, they get left behind." 2 hours later, the bell above the door at Betty's Diner jingled violently. A blast of snowy wind followed a woman inside. It was Martha, the head accountant who had been with Miller and Company since the days when the office was just a rented garage. Martha was 60, a woman of steel gray hair and gentle smiles, but today, she looked broken. Tom, sitting in his usual booth with a black coffee, looked up. He saw the way Martha's shoulders shook, the way she clutched her purse like a shield. He waved her over. "Martha?" Tom asked gently as she slid into the booth opposite him. "What happened?" Martha didn't answer immediately. She fumbled with her purse, pulling out a tissue to dab at red-rimmed eyes. "They let me go, Tom. Just now. Security escorted me out like I was a criminal." Tom felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. "Who did?" "That new boy. Gavin. And Elena signed off on it." Martha sniffled, her voice trembling with humiliation. "They told me I was being let go for inability to adapt to new software protocols." "Tom, I wrote the training manual for the new software." "It was a lie." "I know it was," Tom said softly, signaling Betty to bring another coffee. "They want to erase the past, Martha. I'm sorry you got caught in the crossfire." "It's not just that," Martha whispered, leaning in closer. She looked around the diner to make sure no one was listening. I think I know the real reason." Her hands shook as she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. Inside was a small USB drive. "I wasn't fired because I'm slow, Tom," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "I was fired because I asked questions. Last week, I flagged a series of withdrawals. $50,000, listed as consulting fees paid to a firm called GM Holdings. I looked it up, Tom. The company doesn't exist. The address is a P.O. box in Delaware registered 3 days after Gavin was hired." Tom stared at the USB drive sitting on the Formica table. It wasn't just a divorce anymore. It wasn't just heartbreak. This was theft. Elena and her lover weren't just pushing him out. They were looting the house he and his father had built, brick by brick. They were destroying good people like Martha to fund their vanity. Tom picked up the drive. It felt heavy in his hand, heavier than plastic and metal should feel. The sadness that had weighed on him since the morning began to evaporate, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. He looked at Martha, wiping her tears, and realized he couldn't just walk away. He couldn't go play golf in Florida while vultures picked the carcass of his life's work. Tom grips the coffee mug. "They can take my wife, they can take my office, but they don't get to hurt my people. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but justice? Justice is a dish served with notarized documentation. The law offices of Clara Vance smelled of lemon polish, old leather, and expensive bourbon, the scent of a place where problems came to die. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, white-walled aesthetic of Miller and Company. Here, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with case law, Tom felt the ground beneath his feet stop shaking for the first time in days. Clara Vance, a 58-year-old attorney with a mind like a steel trap and a heart she kept carefully hidden, tossed the divorce settlement onto her oak desk. It landed with a heavy thud. She took off her reading glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "She really thinks you're just a senile old engineer, doesn't she?" Clara asked, her voice dry. "A 5-year non-compete clause? In a state that historically frowns on restricting trade? It's not just aggressive, Tom. It's insulting. She wants to make sure you can't even consult for a lemonade stand, let alone a tech firm." "She thinks I'm weak, Clara," Tom said, sitting in the wingback chair opposite her. "She thinks I stopped paying attention years ago." "And did you?" Tom reached into his briefcase. He didn't pull out the divorce papers. Instead, he placed the silver USB drive Martha had given him onto the desk, right next to a folder labeled 2022 Restructuring. "I trusted her with my heart," Tom said quietly. "But my father taught me never to trust anyone with the checkbook." "Not completely." He nodded at the USB drive. Martha found evidence of embezzlement. Ghost vendors. Consulting fees paid to shell companies owned by Gavin. "It's all there." Clara picked up the drive, turning it over in her fingers. "Criminal fraud. Piercing the corporate veil. If this holds up, we can have them both arrested." "I don't just want them arrested, Clara. If we go to the police now, it becomes a scandal. The stock tanks. The employees, good people like Martha, lose their pensions. I need to cut the cancer out before it kills the patient." Tom leaned forward. "I need to take the company back first." Clara smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression that had terrified opposing counsel for 3 decades. She reached for the dusty folder labeled 2022 Restructuring. "Well then," Clara said, opening the file. "It's a good thing Elena was too arrogant to read the fine print 3 years ago." She pulled out a document, yellowed slightly at the edges. When she proposed the restructuring to make herself CEO, she thought she was signing papers that gave her 51% controlling interest. "She thought you were just signing away your voting rights." "I remember," Tom said. She brought the notary to the house. She had the champagne ready. "But she didn't read the amended bylaws we filed with the Secretary of State that morning," Clara continued, tapping a specific paragraph. Clause 14b, in the event of a restructuring, original founding partners retain superior voting rights and a 57% equity stake, regardless of title changes. "You didn't sign her version, Tom. You signed ours." And because she was so busy measuring the drapes for her corner office, she never noticed. "So I still own it," Tom stated, though it was more of a confirmation than a question. "You own 57% of Miller and Company. You are the majority shareholder. You can fire the CEO, the CFO, and the janitor if you feel like it. Legally, she's been squatting in your chair for 3 years." Clara closed the folder with a satisfying snap. "The question is, when do you want to drop the hammer? We can file an injunction tomorrow." Tom stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the snowy streets of Chicago. He thought about the Christmas gala. He thought about Elena's speech, her pride, her public declaration that he was obsolete. He thought about Martha crying in the diner. "No injunctions," Tom said. "Not yet." The annual shareholder meeting is scheduled during the Christmas gala on December 24th. All the investors will be there. The board will be there. "You want to do this live?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "That's theatrical, Tom. I didn't think you had it in you." She wanted a spectacle, Tom said, his voice hard. She wanted to show the world the new Miller and Company. "I think we should give her exactly what she wants." Clara picked up her pen. "I'll have the paperwork drawn up. Amended bylaws, proof of ownership, and the motion to dismiss the CEO for cause. We'll need notarized copies for every board member." Tom watched as she began to write. The silence in the room wasn't heavy anymore. It was charged with potential. For 3 years, he had played the role of the quiet, supportive husband, stepping back to let his wife shine, ignoring the whispers, hoping her ambition would eventually find a ceiling. but she had broken the ceiling and tried to bring the house down on top of him. He wasn't fighting for his ego. He was fighting for his father's legacy. He was fighting for the Marthas of the world who got discarded by people like Gavin. Tom puts the documents into his briefcase. The papers are ready. The trap is set. The trap is officially set, and Elena has no idea what's coming. If you are still watching and find value in this detailed storytelling, please comment the number 1 below to let me know you're ready for the showdown. And if you haven't yet, I highly recommend you subscribe to Black King and hit that notification bell right now. You definitely don't want to miss the moment the trap snaps shut. Your support helps us continue creating amazing content to inspire you. Now, let's continue to the party. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and expensive champagne, a perfect mask for the rot spreading underneath. Outside, the Chicago blizzard had turned the city into a white howling void, but inside, the air was perfumed with expensive cologne and the soft strains of a live jazz band playing White Christmas. Elena stood at the podium, bathed in a spotlight that made her sequins shimmer like armor. She looked every inch the conqueror. Around her neck hung a diamond necklace, a piece so ostentatious that it caught the light with every breath she took. Tom, had he been there earlier, might have recognized the cost of such a bauble. It was roughly equivalent to the consulting fees siphoned from the company accounts over the last quarter. "Welcome, everyone," Elena purred into the microphone, her voice amplified across the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. "Tonight isn't just a celebration of the holidays. It is a celebration of a new era. For too long, Miller and Company has been tethered to the past, weighed down by outdated methods and sentimental attachments." A ripple of polite laughter moved through the crowd. In the front row, Gavin, wearing a velvet tuxedo jacket that screamed "new money," raised his glass to her. He leaned over to a major investor, his voice carrying just loud enough to be heard by the nearby tables. "We're finally trimming the fat. Getting rid of the dead wood. You'll see the payroll savings in Q1. It's going to be lean and mean." "To the future," Elena continued, raising her hands as if to embrace the room. "Out with the old, in with the bold." The applause began, polite at first, then enthusiastic as the open bar did its work. But the clapping faltered near the back of the room. Heads began to turn. The jazz band trailed off, a saxophone note dying awkwardly in the air. The heavy double doors at the entrance had swung open, letting in a draft of frigid air that cut through the warmth of the ballroom. Thomas Miller stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing the old wool sweater tonight. He was dressed in a dark navy suit, cut in a classic style, perhaps a decade old, but pressed and dignified. He didn't look like a discarded husband or a fired employee. He looked like a founder. But he wasn't alone. On his left stood Clara Vance, clutching a leather briefcase with the grim determination of a soldier going into battle. On his right was Martha. The fired accountant wore her Sunday best, her head held high, though her hands trembled slightly. The trio walked forward. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a wide aisle leading straight to the stage. The silence in the room was absolute, save for the rhythmic click of Tom's dress shoes on the marble floor. Elena's smile faltered, then hardened into a mask of annoyance. She gripped the podium, her knuckles turning white. She leaned into the microphone, her voice echoing with forced levity. "Well, look who decided to show up. I wasn't aware we sent invitations to former staff." She signaled to the shadows near the wings of the stage. "Security? Can we please escort these guests out? They seem to be lost." 2 large security guards in black suits stepped forward, moving toward Tom. The room held its breath. This was the moment of humiliation Elena had planned for, the final ejection of the past. Tom didn't flinch. He didn't stop walking until he reached the base of the stage stairs. He looked up at his wife, then at the security guards. He raised a hand, not in surrender, but in a gesture of calm command so absolute that the guards hesitated. "No need for security, Elena," Tom said, his voice unamplified but carrying clearly in the dead silence. He walked up the stairs, Clara and Martha following close behind. He stood next to her, looking out at the board members, the investors, the employees who had watched him be pushed aside for years. "This is still a family business." Elena hissed at him off mic. "Get out, Tom. You're embarrassing yourself. You're fired." You have no power here. Tom reached into his jacket pocket. And families should be honest with each other. Especially about ownership. They say the pen is mightier than the sword. But tonight, a stack of notarized documents would prove to be the deadliest weapon in the room. Elena tried to grab the microphone back, her composure cracking like cheap porcelain. This is ridiculous. Security. Remove him immediately. But the guards didn't move. They were looking at the man standing next to Tom, Mr. Henderson, the chairman of the board, who had just stood up from his front row seat, his eyes locked on the leather briefcase in Clara's hand. Let him speak, Elena, Mr. Henderson said, his voice grave. Tom nodded his thanks. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply opened the folder Clara handed him and pulled out a document stamped with the official seal of the Secretary of State. 3 years ago, Elena proposed a restructuring of Miller and Company. Tom addressed the room, though his eyes never left his wife's face. She believed that by changing her title to CEO, she automatically gained controlling interest. She thought she owned 51% of this company. I do. Elena snapped, her face flushing red. I have the papers to prove it. You have a proposal, Tom corrected gently. But you never read the final amended bylaws filed with the state. Document A. He handed the paper to Mr. Henderson, who put on his glasses. In the event of restructuring, founding partners retain 57% equity and veto power. I didn't sign your version, Elena. You were too busy picking out furniture for this office to notice that I filed the amended version. The legal version. A gasp rippled through the room. Elena froze. That's a lie. That's fraud. It's due diligence, Tom said. I own 57% of this company, Elena. I always have. Which means I have the authority to remove officers for cause. For cause. Gavin stepped forward, trying to muster his usual arrogance, though sweat was beading on his forehead. You can't just fire us because you're jealous, old man. We've made this company millions. Have you? Tom turned his gaze to Gavin. It was the look of a disappointed father looking at a petulant child. Or have you just moved millions into your own pocket? Tom pulled out the second stack of papers. The USB drive data, printed in stark black and white. Document B, Tom announced, his voice hardening. Bank transfers totaling $400,000 over the last 18 months. Paid to GM Holdings for consulting services. A shell company registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. He projected the image onto the screen behind them, replacing the Miller and Company logo with a bank statement bearing Gavin's signature. There is no consulting firm, Gavin. There is just theft, embezzlement, and a breach of fiduciary duty so severe it carries a prison sentence. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Elena stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing wordlessly. She turned slowly to Gavin, the man she had destroyed her marriage for, the sophisticated partner she had chosen over Tom. Gavin, she whispered, you told me those were legitimate expenses. You said. Gavin backed away, his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of surrender. He didn't look at Elena with love or even pity. He looked at her with panic. I didn't sign the checks, Elena. You did. You're the CEO. It was your idea to hide the money. The betrayal was instant and absolute. Elena reeled back as if slapped. The crowd murmured, a sound of shock and judgment. She looked from Gavin, cowardly and trembling, to Tom, standing tall and righteous. In that split second, the regret didn't just wash over her. It drowned her. She had traded a diamond for a stone. Tom closed the folder. The sound echoed like a gavel strike. You said you needed a partner at your level, Elena, Tom said, his voice devoid of mockery, filled only with a sad finality. Gavin seems perfect for you. You're both fired. Tom signals the security guards, the same ones Elena called. Please escort these trespassers out. Martha, you're rehired. Come finish the speech. The snow outside was fresh and white, covering the dirty slush of the city streets. A clean slate, finally. The chaos of the Christmas Eve gala felt like a lifetime ago, though only 2 days had passed. The headquarters of Miller and Company was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, not the terrified silence of a regime ruled by fear. Tom sat in the corner office, his office again, nursing a cup of black coffee from Betty's diner. Across from him sat Clara, looking unusually tired but satisfied. She placed a final stack of documents on the desk. "It's done," Clara said, taking a sip of her tea. "The board ratified your return as CEO this morning." Gavin was picked up by authorities at O'Hare Airport trying to board a flight to the Caymans. He's singing like a canary, trying to pin everything on Elena. "And Elena?" Tom asked, staring at the steam rising from his cup. "She's facing multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement," Clara replied softly. "Her assets are frozen. The lawyers Gavin hired for her have already quit because her checks bounced. She's looking at a public defender, Tom. And prison time. She's ruined." Tom turned his chair to look out the window. He thought about the woman who had stood beside him at his father's funeral. He thought about the early years, before the money, before the ambition poisoned everything. He remembered the Elena who used to make him soup when he was sick, not the CEO who tried to erase him. "Get her a lawyer, Clara," Tom said quietly. Clara blinked, setting her cup down hard. "Excuse me? After everything she did? She tried to destroy you, Tom." "I know," Tom said, turning back to face her. "And she failed. But I won't be the man who kicks someone when they're down. I won't be Gavin. Hire a decent defense attorney for her. Pay the retainer from my personal account. Not company money. You're a better man than most, Thomas Miller." Clara shook her head, a small, admiring smile playing on her lips. "It's not about being better, Clara," Tom said. "It's about closure. I want to know that when I walk out of here at night, I have nothing on my conscience." Later that afternoon, the outer office was buzzing with a different kind of energy. Martha was moving into the office next to Tom's, the one Gavin used to occupy. She was clearing out Gavin's pretentious modern art and replacing it with photos of her grandchildren. Tom walked in, carrying a pot of fresh coffee. He poured a cup and set it on her desk. For the head of accounts, Tom smiled. "I expect those ledgers to be spotless, Martha." Martha looked up, her eyes misty. "You didn't have to bring me coffee, Mr. Miller. You're the CEO. "I'm just Tom, Martha," he corrected gently. "And in this company, we serve each other. That's how my dad built it. That's how we're going to run it." He walked back to his desk and opened the cardboard box he had packed just weeks ago, the box Elena had watched him pack with such disdain. He pulled out the chipped World's Okayest Dad mug. Then, he pulled out the framed photo of him and his father standing in front of the garage. He placed the photo back in its rightful spot on the mahogany desk. The sun broke through the winter clouds, casting a warm glow on the glass. "We kept the roots, Dad," he whispered. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The storm had passed. The air was clear. He was alone in the office, but the crushing weight of loneliness was gone. He had his company. He had his dignity. And most importantly, he had proven that you don't need to be cruel to be strong. He looks out the window at the Chicago skyline. He is alone, but for the first time in years, he isn't lonely. He is free.